So enough of theory, let's do some hands-on. So what will I do? I'll be creating a VPC, I'll be creating an internet gateway and then attach them. I will also create route tables for public and private traffic. And then we'll be creating 4 subnets. 2 would be public subnet and 2 would be private subnet. The public subnet name would be 3IAM public subnet 1A. It will be created in AZ1A. And then 3IAM public subnet 1B, which will be created in AZ1B. And then we'll be creating 2 private subnets, 3IAM private subnet 1C. The AZ would be 1C and 3IAM private subnet 1D, which will be created in the availability zone 1D. Now, these are the names, so just creating the subnets with public and private name does not make them public subnet and private subnet. We'll have to associate the route tables that we create. So the public route table would be associated with public subnets and the private route table will be associated with the private subnets. Then I will launch one EC2 instance in each of the subnets above. So we'll be launching 4 EC2 instances and then I'll try to SSH in all of them using the public IP address. So how do we get the public IP address? I have already shown you that when you launch an EC2 instance, in the network section, you can actually mention auto assign public IP. You can enable that. So if you enable auto assign public IP, you get public IP address for free. So let us go ahead and do that and execute this hands-on. Okay, so the first thing that we have to do is to create the VPC, and I'm in the VPC dashboard, which is different than the EC2 dashboard. And once you come to the VPC dashboard, just click on your VPC. Now here I already have a VPC created, data engineering on AWS VPC, and it will be used for Redshift. But let me go ahead and create a separate VPC for this particular chapter. Click on create VPC and have the option VPC only, and we'll name it as 3IAM VPC. Now we have to mention a CIDR block. So the CIDR block is basically the network address. Let me mention 17.11.0.0/16. Now what am I saying here? I'm saying that the first 16 bits or the first 2 octets belong to the network. So that is 17, which is the first octet, and 11 is the second octet. So the first 2 octets belong to the network and the last 2 octets or the last 16 bits belong to the devices. Now I cannot have anything other than 0 in the devices because that will not follow the CIDR standard. So if I, let's say, mention 17.11.1.0/16, it will give me error saying that this is not a valid CIDR. You have to mention certain numbers in the network and zeros in the devices. You can also mention 0 in the network because 0 is also a valid number. But that might be a little confusing. That's why we are mentioning 17.11.0.0/16, which is the network address of this VPC or this virtual router. Now click on create VPC and the VPC has been created, and these are the various options. This is the ID, then this is the CIDR block, the owner, ACL, route table, etc. We'll talk about route table later on. This is the route table which was created by AWS by default to be associated with the VPC. So that's all we have to do here. But going further, we have to do one more thing. So just click on actions and edit VPC settings and then enable DNS hostnames and enable DNS resolution. So just tick these two and click on save. So that's all we have to do for the VPC. Then if we look at the components, the next component in the VPC is the internet gateway. So we need internet gateway if we need connectivity to the internet. By default, AWS does not provide internet gateway unlike routers, because we might create a VPC wherein we do not need any internet connectivity at all. That might also happen. So what we have to do is that we'll have to create the internet gateway and attach that with the VPC. Now go back to the console and here we have an option called internet gateway, and click on internet gateways and then click on create internet gateway. The name would be 3IAM VPC Internet Gateway. That's what the name is going to be. So create Internet Gateway. It has been created. It is as simple as that. But after creation, if you see, the state is detached and it is not associated with any VPC. We'll have to change that. We'll have to attach it to a VPC. So click on attach to VPC and select the 3IAM VPC that we have just created. So now this internet gateway is attached to 3IAM VPC, as you can see here. Now the next component are the route tables. So the route tables mention the path or the route of the devices, and after creating the route tables, we'll have to associate them with the subnets. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create only two route tables. One would be a public route table and the other one would be a private route table. So in public route table, there would be a route towards internet, and in private route table, there won't be any route to internet. Now in the console, you have an option of route table here, and now click on create route table. And the name of the route table is 3IAM VPC public route table. Associate this with the VPC, which is 3IAM VPC, and click on create route table. So there are multiple things here. So once the route table is created, you can see routes, subnet associations, edge associations, and route propagation. We are not going to discuss about edge association and route propagation. Subnet association, currently this route table is not associated with any subnets because you have not done so. But in the routes, if we see, there's a destination which is 17.11.00/16 and the target is local. So this is for the path within the VPC. So there's a route to connect to all the devices within the VPC. If you notice, this is the VPC network address, and it will be there in all the route tables that we create inside of a VPC. But we do not have any route towards internet. So let us go ahead and do that. Let us add that route. Click on edit routes and then click on add routes. Now the destination should be internet, and internet is denoted by 0.0.0.0/0. This is how internet is denoted. It means all the devices in the world. So this particular CIDR address means all devices in the world, which essentially means the internet. So the destination is internet, and then we'll have to place a target. So if you remember, the target has to be internet gateway because we cannot connect to the internet without the internet gateway. So click on the target and click on internet gateway and then mention the internet gateway that we created, which is 3IAM VPC IGW. Click on save changes and the route table has been created. So now it has become a public route table because it has a path towards internet. Now let me go ahead and create one more route table, and the name of the other route table would be private route table. Again, it will be in the same VPC, which is 3IAM VPC, and click on create a route table. So as you can see, this route table has been created. We have the same destination added automatically, meaning there should be a path to all the devices within the VPC. That's why the destination is the VPC network address and target is local. Do we need to add any other path? I don't think so, because that's enough. And we do not need any path towards internet, so we can keep it as is. So we have created two route tables, the public route table and the private route table in the VPC, 3IAM VPC. If I refresh, I should be able to see that. So 3IAM VPC public route table and 3IAM VPC private route table. Now let us go ahead and create subnets, because that is the next component. So we'll be creating subnets inside of the AZs, and then we'll associate the route tables that we have created with the subnets. So we'll have to create 4 subnets, 2 public subnets and 2 private subnets in 4 different AZs. So click on subnets and then click on create subnet. I'll select the VPC to be 3IAM VPC, and then the name of the first subnet, which is 3IAM public subnet 1A. So why 1A? Because I want to create this subnet in AZ 1A. This is the VPC CIDR block, and then I'll have to give a network address of the subnet also. So let us give it as 17.11.10/24. Now it is smaller than /16. So this actually belongs to 17.11.00 if you see. So this is the network address of the subnet. Click on create subnet. Now what will you do is that we'll filter it by VPC, which is 3IAM VPC, and this is the subnet that we have created. Now I'll associate the subnet with a route table. So click on the subnet, and then there are multiple options here. We have details. So these are the subnet details, and it is created in AZ1A. This is the CIDR block. Then we have flow logs. We'll not talk about flow logs or network ACL or CIDR reservations. We'll talk about route table. So as this is going to be a public subnet, we'll have to associate the public route table that we created. So click on the route table, click on edit route table association, and then 3IAM VPC public route table, and then click on save. So now if I click on subnet and go to route table, sorry, I associated the private route table. So click on public route table and then click on save. So this subnet has become a public subnet now because I have associated the public route table to this particular subnet. Now let me create one more subnet, and that will also be a public subnet in 3IAM VPC, and the name would be my 3IAM public subnet 1B, and it will be created in AZ US East 1B, and let's mention the CIDR block to be 17.11.2.0/24. That's all. So the subnet has been created. Now as it is a public subnet, I'll have to associate this with the public route table. So edit route table association and select the public route table and then click on save. So these are the two subnets which are public subnets. So 3IAM public subnet 1A and 3IAM public subnet 1B. Now I'll have to create two more private subnets. So click on create subnet, select the VPC. The name of the private subnet would be 3IAM private subnet 1C. It will be AZ1C, and then let's mention the network address to be 10.11.100.0/24. Now why 100? Because public subnet I had given 1 and 2, and private subnet is starting with 100. So that's just a nomenclature that I follow. Obviously your organization might have a different nomenclature. Click on create subnet, and you know what to do. We'll have to change the route table association. This would have been fine because there are no other routes available for this subnet, but as we have created the private route table, we'll associate the private route table with this private subnet. Now we have one more pending. It should be private subnet 1D in AZ 1D, and the CIDR block is 17.11.200.0/24. Click on create subnet, and then select the subnet and change the association of the route table with private route table and click on save. So all these VPC components are done. We created the VPC, we created an internet gateway and attached that internet gateway to the VPC. Then we created two route tables. One is public route table and the other one is private route table. Then you created four subnets. Two are public subnets and two are private subnets, and associated the public route table with the public subnets and the private route table in the private subnets. One more thing is that now if you go to the route tables and select, let's say, any one of the route tables, click on subnet association. Now it will show you that which subnets are associated with this particular route table. In our case, private subnet 1C and private subnet 1D is associated with private route table, and public subnet 1 and public subnet 1B are associated with public route table. Now let us go ahead and launch one EC2 instance each in all of these subnets. So now let us go ahead and launch the EC2 instances in these subnets in the VPC. As usual, click on launch instances, and I'll name the EC2 instance to be 3IAM EC2 public 1A because I'm going to launch this EC2 instance in the public subnet 1A, and I'll not select the AMI that we had created. I'll select a fresh AMI without any softwares installed. So that is Amazon Linux 2. So the architecture is 64-bit. This is the user, EC2-user as usual. The instance type, I'll keep it as t2.micro because we are not going to install any heavy duty stuff, and we are not even going to do any operations in the EC2 instance. I'll keep the key pair as 3IAM appendix A1 EC2 key pair. We'll use the same key pair as the previous section. Now here what things change. So far we have not been changing the network settings, but now I'll be changing that. Now click on edit and then select the 3IAM VPC. And I want to launch this VPC in the public subnet 1A, so select the same and enable auto assign public IP because we want to make sure that all the EC2 instances get public IP address. So for security group, we'll create a new one wherein we'll be allowing SSH from anywhere. So just make sure that we have SSH in type and source type anywhere. We'll talk about security group in the next slide. And storage would be same as this, and that's all. Launch the instance. So one EC2 instance has been launched. So I'll have to launch 3 more EC2 instances. The name of this EC2 instance is going to be 3IAM EC2 public subnet 1B, and I will select Amazon Linux 2. Instance type would be same, t2.micro, and I will use the same key pair. But in network settings, I'll select 3IAM VPC, and then subnet would be 3IAM public subnet 1B because I want to launch this EC2 instance in the public subnet 1B. Enable auto assign public IP address, and while creating the previous one we had created a security group which is I think launch wizard 4, and we'll select that one and click on launch instances. Similarly, I'll be launching 2 more instances. The name is 3IAM EC2 private 1C, and the AMI would be Linux 2 as usual, T2 micro, and this time the network would be private subnet 1C, and enable auto assign public IP. Select the security group that we have been using so far, which is launch wizard 4, and then click on launch instances. We are pending with the last EC2 instance. This is 3IAM EC2 private 1D, and in the network settings the VPC would be 3IAM VPC, but the subnet would be private subnet 1D, and enable auto assign public IP. We'll select the existing security group launch wizard 4. So these are the 4 instances that we have launched: 3IAM EC2 public subnet 1B, 1A, 3IAM EC2 private 1C, and private 1D. So what am I going to do now is we'll try to SSH into all of these EC2 instances. But before that, let's take a look at it. So 3IAM EC2 public subnet 1B, if I select that, I have a public IP address. And take a look at the private IP address. It is 17.11.2.93. Why? Because the initial 24 bits belong to the network, which is 17.11.2, and as I had launched this in that particular subnet, that's why the initial octets are 17.11.2, and then 93 is the device ID. Similarly, for public subnet public EC2 1A, it will be 17.11.1 because I had launched it in the network or in the subnetwork with a network address of 17.11.1.0/24. Similarly would be for private IP address, private EC2 instance, the IP address starts with 17.11.200.202 because I had launched this EC2 instance in the private subnet with a network address of 17.11.200.0/24. Similar would be the case with EC2 private 1C also. It was launched in the private subnet which is in 1CAZ, and of course it starts with it 17.11.100.82. So all of them have public IP address. So let me go ahead and try to SSH into the EC2 public 1A. So the EC2 instance which is there in the public subnet. So I'm able to SSH into that EC2 instance. So if you see it shows the IP address here also 17.11.1.132. I can install the software that I want, sudo yum install /y mysql. So it is working. Let's try to log in to the EC2 instance which is in public subnet 1B, which is this one, and the IP address is this. And I should be able to SSH into this EC2 instance also. And I can install MySQL here as well, because there's a path or route to internet and it is downloading from internet. So that's why I was able to SSH into the EC2 instance in the first place. Now let's try the same with the EC2 instance which are there in private subnet. So this is the public IP address, and now I should not be able to SSH into it. It should give us operation timeout error because there's no path to internet. So from my machine there's no way that I can get into the EC2 instance, because my machine is in internet. It is going to the VPC, but from that VPC there's no way to get into the private subnet because there's no internet gateway associated with it. So no internet traffic can get into that subnet, neither any traffic can get out of that subnet. So that's why it is not working. So as you can see, it says operation timed out because there was no path found for this EC2 instance. And let me try to SSH into the other EC2 instance which is there in private subnet 1D. I should not be able to do so as well. It would also give operation timed out error. As you can see, I've got the same error, operation timed out. What it means is that even if you have internet gateway attached to the VPC, we cannot connect any device or any EC2 instance with internet which are there in the subnets unless the subnets are associated with public route table. So public route table is a route table wherein we have a route to internet, and private route table is a route table which does not have a route to internet. Because we had launched the EC2 instance in the subnets which had private route table associated with it, it made those subnets as private subnets, and there's no internet connectivity to those EC2 instances which are launched in the private subnet. But at the same time, the EC2 instances which were launched inside of the public subnet, which has an association with public route table, which has a path to internet, we were able to SSH into it. Make sure to terminate the instances after your exercise is done, otherwise you'll be charged with unnecessary money.